Hello everybody, hope you're doing well. Today I'm going to be doing a review of the new Bladee album called Sulfur. So everybody, this is the brand new album, at least the time recording, of the new album by Bladee. This is the Swedish rapper who's been creating music since 2011, and 15 years is a very impressive longevity when it comes to especially the internet age of rap music. And Bladee is someone who I have loved since Red Lights, so it's been nearly 10 years since I basically came across Bladee. And ever since, I have really enjoyed following his entire catalogue and discography and everything that, when I was a new fan, had been following and seeing what he would release. He's always someone who's pushing boundaries, trying different things, and even if those things aren't something that appeals personally to me, you always have to give credit to someone who's at least trying to do something different all the time, instead of just sticking to their guns and creating something that they think the fans would enjoy rather than something that they wish to do themselves. I can't believe it's been nearly 4 years since I've talked about Bladee. Spider came out in 2022, which I enjoyed a fair bit. That's not to say that within the 4 years of not talking about him, he hasn't been active. He's been releasing a plethora of quite a lot of different projects, ranging from EPs to singles, and of course the other album which came out after Spider, which is a one that I personally felt is the best thing that he's released since Ice Dancer, so it's his second best in my opinion. The album called Visions, which I thought was absolutely fantastic. So there was no reason for me to not enjoy the new album by Bladee, because not only was I excited about him following up this album called Visions, but also the ideas that he was throwing out to the audience and hinting towards where he was going to go as a direction was very much exciting to me. Not too long ago, Bladee had released an EP which was dedicated to St. George, which is a martyr, very much popular in British mythology and sort of Christian mythology as well. And the idea of a rapper making music dedicated to something like that in itself is such an out there idea, but is the reason why I particularly enjoy Bladee's music and think he's such an imaginative person. And the idea of it being called First Attempt, as if like the music that he was creating, where he even thought it wasn't good enough to hold a candle to someone like St. George, and that he's going to have another attempt later on, which to me at least would have been this album Sulfur. He said in interviews he was going to make an album about St. George, and even though I thought this album would have been just called St. George, it's called Sulfur. And there are many references to St. George, but it seems like Bladee Nebby's kind of half gave up on the idea of it and has made something a bit different. I'm not sure, but I will say overall, I'm not that impressed with this record. And it's a hard one to say because Nebby's, because of my opinions of what Bladee was going to do, which I know he should never really do with someone like this guy, didn't meet my standards or what I thought he was going to do. I'm disappointed, but because I've put that idea in my head that he's going to do this and I didn't see him do that, I'm almost disappointed in that respect. But at the same time, in terms of the quality of the music and what's happening on this album, again, I've gave it many listens and nothing's happening with this for me. A good way to start out why I think I should relate my personal imagination to what Bladee expects is because on this first track, a self-titled song, which I think is really good if it wasn't being interrupted consistently by Bladee stopping the music basically and like doing this spoken word speech, which is kind of cool at first as it's like an intro, but to do it again in mid-song, I thought it was like you're killing this sort of flow of this track. But at the very end of the song, he does this again sort of spoken word part where he's basically saying to the audience, "Are you pretending to feel me?" And I'm like, I don't know. I don't know what you want from me, mate. Like, do you want me to think that you're going to make a song or an album all about St. George? I don't know what direction you're going, especially when, like I say you're going to do one thing and then do something else. Like, I can't pretend to do anything here. I don't know what you want from me. I think it's because the idea of mythology being covered in hip-hop is such an alien concept, and I like anything that's pushing boundaries, and maybe in my personal life, I just personally have interest in that. I'm from the northeast, and there's the Lambton Worm, which is very famous around my area, which again is all about a person killing a dragon, and that's obviously part and parcel of what St. George is popular for. Is he, though? Because at the same time of killing a dragon, he's also a saint and a martyr. And basically, what Bladee is doing here is something that I thought wouldn't happen. I thought, wrongly, that this was going to be a project dedicated to St. George. But what I realised instead in the lyrics, Sulfur, Surfer, Saint Usurper, so he's an usurper to saint, so he's taken the reign of being a saint or a martyr. He's kind of using it as a flex in a way. And it's not like I'm finding that, like a sort of blasphemous thing to do. I just thought, oh, that's not what I was expecting here. Again, this sort of contrast is always a big thing with Bladee, using the ideas of trash and rubbish alongside being very interested in high fashion, the idea of doing things like light and dark, the night and the day, and then other things like what he does here, which is using Christianity, I'm a good boy on the track, no cussing, to just being overly vulgar in some songs. He's very obviously self-aware of this, and I think he's also aware of he's probably counting himself as a martyr because he's pushing boundaries all the time, and maybe it's because of him doing that and not doing what everyone else is doing in his other contemporaries in his sort of hip-hop line. He's risking doing something which is maybe is a bit strange and won't go over well. Yeah, that's the part, like I say, that I self-respect, but it's also, again, something that I wasn't expecting this album had an overall theme of. But don't get me wrong, St. George in general is brought up quite a fair bit. There's the ideas of using pain, again, using martyrism alongside that, and other sort of mythologic mentions here and there. But I think it's the fact that it's just hinted towards and it's not a big part of the actual album itself is a bit disappointing for me. But also, it's the sound too. In terms of changing different styles, I remember once upon a time there was an era where Bladee was saying that he was focusing on using purposely simplistic lyrics, and if anything, he's went totally the opposite. And his lyrics are very poetic and very dense. And I would find that very interesting if it had the melodic accompaniment alongside that, both in the instrumentals and what Bladee does himself as a vocalist. And Sulfur Surfer isn't hitting that for me at all. The disappointment aspect for what White Armour is doing on this music comes in two different parts. One of which is the fact that I don't think it's really pushing many boundaries in terms of what he's not covered already before. Like, I feel like some of the instrumentals here are just rehashing older similar styles that he's done before. Some of which being tracks like Delore, which I feel is just a red light sounding outtake with a more crushed up sounding beat. Duran's Bane or Kill Switch, which in general I just think are just pretty bad instrumentals and not that exciting at all for me. But for me too, it's the idea that if you're going to come across using mythologic idealisms with your music, I feel like you have to have instrumental which sounds like it comes from that. So when I would imagine something like the lyrical topics that are covered on here, I would imagine that accompanying that would be something that sounds a lot more acoustic, more medieval, for example, or chamber inspired. But instead, it's kind of like the same old style. And again, maybe that's the purpose, contrast between archaic and futuristic. But I just feel like it's not hitting the lyrical topics and the possibilities that could have been hit with what Bladee is possibly trying to do here. So whilst the majority of this record is very synthetic, there are elements of where it does try and go acoustic. For example, there's Fox and Birch, which not only has this ending passage, which has a bit more of that sort of chamber-infused style, but at the same time, it actually features the one and only current 93's David Tibet, and that is someone who is not shy at all when it comes to Christian lyrical topics and having that sort of pagan style to his music. He's done that for a long, long time in his career. But at the same time, it's the fact that that song barely has David Tibet on it. He's got a very, very short feature on it, if you would even call it much. But at the same time, it's like, it's felt so tagged on, this last part. Like, the song doesn't really feel seamless between Blade's part and David's part. It feels like David Tibet was just kind of added on it, and it just feels like a bit of a Current 93 outtake. Like, imagine if Current 93 and Blade played off amongst each other. Like, that would have been really interesting. And the fact that Blade, like I say, does spoken word passages on this album here and there obviously must be an inspiration from what Current 93 sometimes does in their music too. But again, I just walked away quite disappointed with the style. There's also like the second half of Scab and the ending of Dark Mirror as well, which also don't really go seamlessly with how they change from the sort of typical trap, cloud rap, sort of hybrid style to, again, this more acoustic style. It just feels tagged on, and the actual music itself is a bit meandering and plodding. Like, there's nothing interesting going on with it. Like, if you remember that project that existed with Young Lean and Blade that came out just a couple of years back, like the instrumental, for example, for Dark Mirror, it just feels like that gothic sort of cold wave post-punk bass has been added randomly. It feels like an outtake from that, honestly. It's just not interesting. And there's Blade himself on stuff like Duran Bay. He just sounds bored. And and Fox and Birch as well. He sounds so sleepy on that song at the start. It feels like he's not singing, he's yawning the lyrics. It's strange. And the strangeness, again, is going to be hit and miss. Sometimes I find the strangeness in Blade's music to be amazing, but other times I'm going to find it just strange, and that's it. And I think that's the other thing I'm just going to have to mention overall in this review. This might appeal a lot to different people, but for me, this just has been a swing and a miss the whole time, really. And that's not saying that there isn't like good songs here and there. I mean, the lead single for this, Blondie, I thought actually has a lot of pep in its step. Is very punchy and has just some sort of like more of a aggressiveness factor to it, and is very melodic and has played trying different types of melodies as well throughout the song. It changes in style, but it flows well. And other songs on here, like for example the third track, is having him do like these harsh vocals as well, and that awkwardness factor again is nothing new to Blade, but to that I just feel like, why is he doing this here? I don't really get it. What doesn't help either is the mixing of Blade. Like, I find myself having to actually just separately go on my phone and look up the lyrics of these songs, because when I'm actually listening to it, it just like goes. And it's not like because the lyrics are, like I say, sort of dense and a bit abstract. It's like I literally can't follow what Blade's even saying. And this like emotional attachment which I have to Blade's previous music, some of the most gorgeous songs I've ever heard, like Ego Baby and just countless ones, there's none of that here. And it's weird because the real hint towards Blade covering St. George is the song St. George the Martyr off the EP that he released. And that, I'm not joking here, I think is one of the best songs he's ever released. It's so ethereal and has this beautiful melodic charm to it. It's like a wondrous, amazing style to it, which kind of harkens back to how I felt when Exeter was released. And it's just not here on this album at all. So will there be a second attempt or a final attempt of covering St. George? I'm not sure. I have a feeling that Blade's kind of just abandoned the idea and did halfway through creating this project. It's a shame, and I really wish I could find someone really going out of the way to incorporate hip-hop with mythology and actually using, like I say, the ideas of chamber music and more old sort of styles of sound. And where will I get that, really? Like, not with hip-hop. In terms of mythology being covered, that's nothing new for music in general. I mean, you've got folk rock, you've got chamber pop, a lot of metal music does it too, but in terms of hip-hop, the only thing I can think of where it was seen from the start to the end is Orpheus versus the Sirens by Carr, and that's literally the only thing I can think of. So it's so sparse, this idea. And someone like Blade is someone who's very much capable of doing it. I know he could, but that's where the disappointment for me lies on top of this project in terms of melodies covered, or it's just sound, it just isn't hitting for me, sadly. So there's elements of songs that I like here, but I'll be honest, I'm not really returning much to this project. It's an alright one to sort of listen to from front to back, but in terms of going to specific songs, there's nothing really drawing me to anything. And that's why I'm very disappointed with this record, to be honest. I'll give it like a 5 out of 10. But yeah, I'm sorry about that, but you know, like I say, Blade changes a lot in his styles, and hopefully he'll have a new one up in the works that appeals to me a lot more. But for now, you know what, just wasn't for me, and that's okay. I hope you guys are enjoying it a lot more than I am. And if you have different thoughts to what I've covered here, then please let me know in the comments. But otherwise, we'll see what Blade brings us next time. But for now, thank you very much for watching. Take care of yourselves. Bye for now.